Yeah.
All right, welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Children of God pod. We got 2 cameras, 3 microphones, 2 couches, and we're really just trying to spread the word of God and kind of shine the light on whatever we do know and the topics that we do discuss. I forget to mention this, so I'm going to make sure I say it. Make sure you guys give us a couple comments, give us some feedback, and most importantly, subscribe so we can continue to grow our audience and our fan base and really just shepherd the flock of whoever loves us, wants to hear more from us, but most importantly, whatever God gives us. My name is Wyatt. We got Enze over here in the Hello Kitty racing shirt. Brett on the other couch. He doesn't have a palm tree shirt on today, but he's got the palm tree hat. So, he's still rocking that. I don't know if you guys spent too much time with the last episode. But what did you guys like about it?
I think for me, the big thing, one was just like a biblical foundation, like especially after the first episode, I think we did really well. Just like grounding what we were saying in scripture, which I think is important. And then just vulnerability. Like it's something I want to like personally prioritize on here. Like it's just something that I'm not really afraid to do. And so especially with some of these questions that we're going to go through today, with our topic of forgiveness, like it's just something that I think we should continue to build and grow. And I really liked just how we started that last week.
Me personally, I loved everything. I loved less talking about football. That was the main thing. Other than that, just the foundation of it being like biblical and just us having like an actual topic. It wasn't introduction. We were like actually talking about the Bible and God.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and like you guys talked, it's the content that we actually want to provide. The first episode, it was more or less, you get to kind of see how we banter with each other, and you got to see that a little bit in the part of the last episode where we just, we took the message of make your bed to on a whole tirade and a little spiral. But I know that was probably informational for at least a couple people, and I know some people that have actually been like, oh, you know what? That's like now I'm doing this or now I'm doing that, which is just like the little small disciplines that we really wanted to like share and shine light to. So I'm very glad and happy that we were able to even just help one person, if not more people that kind of watch it that we don't know about. In the first episode, it was just like, it was kind of like we have to sort of do this sort of thing. But now it's like, okay, now we get to talk about and be vulnerable with what we actually want to do, which is actually pretty cool. Yeah. Is there anything that you think we could have done better? Or did you guys just like it?
I liked it. I couldn't think of anything that we could do any better. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think I said it last week, but questions 2 and 3, like as we get to even what I'm blanking on question 3, even though I know it, or what we want to add. I think I still need a few more episodes just to kind of discern that and continue to work through that. It's kind of hard to tell now. But I think as we continue to do that, I think it'll be easier to come up with like ways to improve that.
Right. So I know one things that I did was I was kind of a poor listener at some points, and I was always trying to move on to the next thing. So I do want to apologize for that. And then there's also points where I really just missed the mark. You said this within like 5 to 10 minutes of like, no, sometimes God is going to like help you or not help you, but like make you just fall straight on your face. And I was like, oh no, but he's going to pick you up. And he's like, no, there's like two times. And he's like, no, you're going to have to reach out your hand and like kind of like help, as your teammates in sports, you fall on the ground, they help you pick you up. In that same instance with God's going to do that. If they're reaching out for you, you have to grab their hand to like, with that sort of help. I just completely missed that mark. So I was like, I watched that back when editing and all that sort of thing. I was like, shoot, dude, like how did I just mess up that bad? But then moving on to the next thing is like, what would you like to add on? Was there anything that like you actually started to take away and like sort of help you change within that last episode, or?
Just it kind of reinforced my discipline, I would say. Just to like keep going and just stay strong. I don't think there's anything I really changed much.
Dishes started getting cleaner a little bit quicker at your house.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I was there today. I wouldn't go that far.
Hey,
I wouldn't go that far.
We were busy this morning.
I don't think it's really changed. I think it more just like continued to expose where I was falling short discipline wise. And we're still kind of working through like the building blocks of how to build that up. Golly, but it definitely that'll go on the blooper reel later. But it definitely exposed like just some more areas of discipline I was lacking that I just didn't know about.
So did you start the journal, or did you not?
I
get
did
one
not.
yet?
I haven't. It was a rough week.
Did you even
So-
get one?
I have this one.
You do have that one. Is that like actually what you would use it for, or?
This is I always have one journal for everything. It's just easier. So this has like Sunday sermon notes, stuff from work, preparation for this. Like I find it easier to keep everything in one. And then as I go back, it's just kind of like just where was I the last couple weeks?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of fun for me to go back and see when it's all in one versus just so many. And I'll lose it if it's multiple of them and forget it and put the wrong things in the wrong one. So it's easier to just have one.
Okay. So I got you a gift. I don't know if you want to use it or not.
Oh my God. As I say, I only use one.
As you say, you only use one. You don't have to accept this, or you know, after this, you could leave it at my house if you don't feel like you want it.
Oh, we'll take it.
But
We'll
I
use
think it is very important.
that way we can use it. We can bring it next week and show that we actually used it.
Right. You don't have to share what's actually in it, but you know, even just flash the camera that there is some sort of ink in it.
There
and you
is
actually
writing.
right. That
Thank
there
you.
is writing. So you know,
Thank you for
it's small. You can start simple.
Well, the
and it's
pages are very big.
very big, but you know, like there's only a few lines, like a couple sentences will help fill it
Put
up. So
upside down. I don't know.
just however you want to do it, but it's like, you know, as you like you say with that, you can just date it. You can start dating the stuff in that, and it'd be like, oh, it's its own separate thing. It's its own little entity for you to actually just like give extra praise, because you know sometimes in that you're probably taking notes, you're learning some more things, but it's, you know, gaining that wisdom and then also like giving praise they can be in the same book, but you want to, I guess personally, I like to separate it a little bit. So
Thank you.
yeah. Anything else, or should we just move on to the first question?
Let's get to the questions.
What's so funny about me having to drink a Pepsi Lime?
It was the way you looked at
Just
Hey, that's
looking
what's
over
keeping
to
me
us.
going, man.
Question 1 is, what does forgiveness truly mean to you?
So, all right, I'll go first. I'll go first on this one.
You're gonna have to kick it off starting like that.
All right. So for me, forgiveness, I'm definitely stealing these words I'm about to say from other people. But for me, it's right that if that person asks you for forgiveness or whatever the situation is, right? If I say I forgive you, or I decide that I'm gonna forgive, I'm gonna not bring it back up to that person, not bring it back up to myself. I'm just gonna let it go, right? That's what I see it as. And for me, it's kind of always been easier, like, to forgive, but like that's the process I go through.
Yeah.
All right, you're looking over at me, so I'll go ahead and give
I
my
was just
definition. My definition is, you know, I saw these words somewhere online as I was looking up the actual definition, and then it was like, no, this is more about kind of the process of it. It's the transformation of feelings, attitudes, and behaviors so that you are no longer dominated by resentment and can express compassion, generosity, or the like towards the person who wronged you. Which is, you know, I guess, and then in my own words, it's, yeah, you have these sort of ideas. You might have this anger or resentment, as it explains, but then it's shifting how you completely change about it, because, you know, and there's other verses that we'll get into, but it's a matter of, it's a process. You can't just like, I don't know, maybe it's easier for you guys, but you can't just like, or at least for me, I can't just snap my fingers and everything goes away. It's something you have to continuously work towards and change in multiple different areas.
Yeah, I love those. I just think you're missing one key thing. My definition is kind of simple. It's just to extend the grace God has given us upon one another. I would argue in some sense that like without an understanding of God's grace, that like true and genuine forgiveness is impossible, or at least nigh impossible. Because in some sense, forgiveness is a recognition of like the forgiveness and grace that God has given us, and then extending that upon another when they don't deserve it. And so that's where, like, I think God's grace has to play an integral part in, like, the foundation of, and like you guys kind of hinted at it just in your definition. I think that has to play a very key role. Well, I think it is the role. I think it is the definition, is like God's grace, just you're extending just a glimpse of God's grace to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So does that mean, I guess what you kind of hinted at was I didn't mention God's grace in my definition that would like kind of is like the point you were trying to add to my definition?
Yeah, like your guys' definitions are fine. Like they're perfect. I think it's just like what your definitions are like not changing your definition, but what your definitions are encapsulating is the extension of like the grace of God that we try to give to somebody, because we can't obviously give the same grace that God gives us to somebody else. But just extending like some sort of God's grace to somebody else, like, which is what you guys are getting at. I'm not saying your definitions are bad. It's just, that's what you were encapsulating.
Right. Well, I guess, to go back off of what you just said is like, and I'd love to see how I can pick your brain with this, but what if somebody like, somebody that's non-Christian or doesn't follow any religion, if they don't know what God's grace is, does that mean they're not able to forgive?
See, I think, because we'll get into it honestly a little bit in the next question of different levels of forgiveness. I don't think there are different levels of forgiveness. I think there's either like true, genuine, like you have recognized that person doesn't deserve grace and yet you have given it to them anyways, or you haven't. And I guess in some sense there can be like an extension of God's common grace upon somebody, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I think true, genuine, like forgiveness comes out of God's grace. And I guess that can be accomplished through like a recognition of his common grace in some sense. But without his grace, I just don't know how you can say you've truly, genuinely forgiven somebody. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's just kind of where I fall with that.
So
okay. Go ahead.
Just from like, back and forth there, kind of going off of what you asked, Brett, I think even with believers that I don't think like we're able, like, what's the wording here? Able to fully forgive. Like, so like our forgiveness to like compared to God's is like two entirely different things. Like, like we can't forgive someone like God forgave us. Like, it's like we can't give that same grace to that extent. But even for non-believers, I feel like that is kind of like still the same. I don't know where I was going with that.
Right.
But like kind of still the same. Like they're like they can still forgive. But I don't think that like for us it's a little bit different because we like know about that grace that God has given us for forgiving us.
And I guess like, in some sense maybe it is levels. Maybe there are. I guess I might advocate for levels. I might just go back on what I said 30 seconds ago. But like I think there's a difference between like a mental forgiveness and a like true heart forgiveness. And I guess what I would say is that like non-believers or even believers that are forgiving not out of a place of like recognition of God's grace, but just saying I forgive you and forgetting, that's more of a like mental forgiveness of like, I'm just going to let this go, versus a like true, genuine, like I'm not only going to like part of me would say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about recognizing that they messed up. They don't deserve grace, but I'm going to give them grace and love them anyways. And I don't think you can do that if you forget. Like God doesn't forget our sins. He graciously forgives them and loves us in spite of them. And so I think like to forgive without a recognition of God's grace or out of God's grace is more of that mental, like I'm just going to forgive and forget, as people say, versus like forgive and love, which is the point of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I didn't even mark this down, but now that you're like mentioning it, it's like if you get, I forget which verse it is, but it's like if somebody slaps you in the face, don't turn your cheek for them to slap the other one. Like, you remember the first hit, but you forgive it. You don't like continuously let the same person do the same action to you over and over and over again. Even though if they do that same action, it's obviously you're going to forgive and forgive and forgive. But it's not like, oh, you kind of just like brush it off and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to like pretend like it never happened sort of thing. Like you remember it happened, but it's the way then you carry yourself after that action, which is the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Not just completely being like, oh, snap, everything that just happened is kind of gone. No, it's like remembering within like, and kind of having chain links of everything that has happened. And that kind of like builds you to the person you are today. Is what's happened to you in the past now shapes the person you are in the present. And that's what makes everybody different and so unique.
Yeah.
But we're already mentioning question 2. So for the audience that won't know, is question 2 is, can there be different levels of forgiveness? If so, what are they? And unless you guys have something to share right away, this is the question where I spent countless hours actually studying it. So I would love to share what was said, and I'll make sure I link the little article in the description for whoever wants to, but it's by Stephen Marmer, and it describes 3 different levels of forgiveness. So there's exoneration, which is the closest thing, like the closest to the perception of forgiveness, where it's like, oh, you know what, you are forgiven, and it's where you wipe the slate entirely clean, and you like restore the innocence behind it. And 3 sort of different ways that this would be done is like, for instance, there's a pure accident. Like if you were to be drinking something and I like bumped you, and I was like truly sorry for this, or you knew it was an accident, it's easier to forgive knowing that like they meant no harm by it. Or if it's like a child or somebody that isn't able to understand, like for instance, if I squirt, like as a kid, like if you were like some random kid came up to you and like squirted a water gun at you, you'd be like, okay, they don't know the situational awareness of this to be like, oh, okay, you know what, it's just water. But if somebody like randomly decided to do this, you'd be like, okay, they should probably know this isn't the best thing for them to act. Or if somebody like you can tell that they are truly sorry. Like those 3 things kind of make up exoneration. The next one would be forbearance, which is an apology, but not the one you kind of maybe wanted. Like if, for instance, and I guess an example of that would be like, oh, Brett, I'm sorry for doing X thing to you, but I acted this way because you triggered some sort of action. It's not me taking full accountability for it. I am apologizing in some sort of way, but it's not like a full apology where like, I'm truly sorry for it. And then the third thing is release, where like, I guess maybe this could be like with abuse or something like that in the past, or actions that were never truly like somebody said like, I'm sorry for. And it's like, if you stop living based on hurt done, but release that, and without the release, you are allowing it to like live rent free and consistently reliving that situation or scenario continuously persecutes you from the original incident. And that's the one that is mainly tied to religion, is the release factor, because there's many times in your life that somebody won't actually apologize or say they're sorry for something they've done, and you have to live with this, and then that's you giving up, like, you know what, I'm forgiving what somebody else has done to me, which might be hard, because I know there's many things that have happened to me in the release category where somebody hasn't come up to me, and I've been like, you know what, I forgive them, I give that to God to have his actions and his will be done. It's nothing I can do. So those, like, I know you said you didn't have the levels, you might have gone back on it, but I think those are, after reading this, I think there has to be levels of forgiveness, because not everything is forgived on the same like level or path.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I was about to say that basically goes with what I had. What I had was kind of the same, just kind of worded like much differently. It was like one, like you forgive them and like it's like again clean slate, like nothing ever happened, right? My second one was like you forgive them, but like there's some boundaries, like if they're like done this thing to you multiple times, you might like put up some boundaries, like be like, oh, this, or you kind of push yourself away from them. And my third one was like kind of like you forgive them, but you're like, I don't want to associate with this person anymore because like it was whatever it was happened so many times, or it was just that bad. But you're saying like I forgive you, but like I want to distance myself, kind of like that. So, I mean, I feel like they're kind of the same, kind of like same thought.
So you saw me just open up my Bible, and that's one of the ones I wanted to mention is like what you basically just described was the second point that I made was the forbearance, and there's 2 instances of Proverbs alone. Proverbs 10 verse 12, which I will read, and then Proverbs 17 verse 9, which is basically in addition to the one Proverbs 10 12, and Proverbs 10:12 from NIV says, "Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs." So it's like, okay, there's that conflict, but it's a matter of if you're going to then make that decision to kind of like reverse what would happen in a sense. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to share, Brett, on that topic, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I really like what you guys said. I didn't really have much on that because I didn't have any levels. So
Okay. And then I guess there is one more verse that I would like to share for the release. As you can probably tell, this is what I spent most of the research for this episode on was Ephesians chapter 4 verses 31 and 32. And it's state and NIV again, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. And that's the one with the release where, okay, you know what? You have all these sort of thoughts and ideas that have gone like kind of cause you to spiral. And that's what's, the living rent free in your head sort of thing that our generation the term is very fond in our generation. Of you're holding on to all this and it'll never make you heal until you give it up. So, yeah. But you guys ready to move on to question 3, it seems like?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What has been one of the hardest things you've learned about forgiveness?
Okay. I'll go first again. So for me, kind of growing up, I don't know. I've always like if I've been wronged, I've always like been able to forgive like relatively easily. Like okay, this happened. Like it happened. Like my thought process has always been like it happened. I can't do anything about it now. Even if they give me an apology, even if they don't, like there's no point in me holding on to it because it does me no good. So I usually like forgives and like when I was younger, it's usually forgive and forget. Like it's gone. Like it didn't happen. And what I struggled with was if I wronged somebody, right? Like I'd be thinking like, oh, I forgave them so easily, but now they're like holding this against me. Just like that everyone forgives like a little bit differently. Like it's not the same pace. It's like it looks different for each person. It's kind of something I've struggled with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the hardest thing for me has been like how easy it is to not be genuine about it. Like how easy it is, almost how easy it is to say like, yeah, I'll pray for that. And then whoosh out the head it goes. Like to say like, yeah, I forgive you. And then walk away or text like, yeah, I forgive you, or say it on the phone. Like, and then you struggle to sleep at night because you're still thinking about it and wrestling with it. Like it's so hard to truly like there's like I said, the difference between like mental forgiveness and heart forgiveness. Like it is very, at least I have seen even with other people, like it is very easy to mentally forgive and then still battle through it and still work through it. And even the times I thought I've like forgiven and forgot it, a month later it resurfaces and it's like, why am I still thinking about this? Why am I still angry about this? And it's because there wasn't that true genuine forgiveness. And so just trying to figure out like what does that look like to truly be genuinely like forgiving has just been like, that's been the hardest thing, is just how to truly be genuine about it.
And then that brings me exactly to the next verse that I wanted to bring up, which is excuse me, I got to move this out of my way so I can read it. Matthew 18 verses 21 and 22. And that kind of brings the point of like, oh, I've forgiven up here, but I haven't forgiven in my heart. And it's the Lord Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. And I remember talking with Buck, one of those cigar talks that we had. It was like, okay, yeah, it's hard to forgive because you can say you forgive and you can try like actually truly mean it, but it's like forgiveness is like walking up that whole staircase. You don't just take one step and you're all the way up to the next story. It's like you have to forgive and forgive and forgive, and it's like no, it's all of these times that you've had to like progressively forgive for something to truly let go. I don't know. You mentioned before we started filming, we said save this for the podcast, and like, oh, you're just like you've never like truly had like that. Maybe that could be wrong, and we're gonna really pick your brain and make you come up with something. But it's like, oh, dude, it's sometimes, and especially for me, there's been a lot of times in my life where it's like, this is so hard to forgive, or there's still stuff that I wrestle with. So maybe how I knew so much about discipline, and I know like need to learn more about forgiveness, and that's probably why I spent so much time in this, because there was like a lot of thoughts that I was like, I'm still wrestling with this. I'm still wrestling with this. And many times where I've said I've forgiven, it could like still come back, and I still kind of feel that resentment, or it still like irks me in the side. Like it's like a splinter that's just constantly, it's something I can't consistently pull out. Or when I stepped on a bee and I pulled out the stinger and it was still my foot was still swollen for 48 hours. It was like, no, yeah, I got rid of the thing that like hurt me, but it's over time, it's still like needing to heal, and those wounds are still like needing to close. So it's, I guess, that's one of the things that I'm convicting myself of right now, is I need to become better at forgiveness. And it's like a hard walk, but
yeah, I think one thing with the whole staircase thing, I remember at one point just truly being like, why does it take so long to forgive sometimes? Like, why am I struggling to forgive with this? What is so hard? Or even like, I thought I forgave that. Like, why is it popping back up? Why am I still struggling with this? And going back to God's grace, I remembered like how many times I have gone to God and asked for forgiveness for the same exact thing. And how all forgiveness is, in some sense, is someone like doing you wrong, just like we do God wrong. And so of course it's something we're going to struggle with, because like people doing us wrong is going to be a constant thing. Like people are never going to be perfect towards each other. And so we're going to struggle with forgiveness because it's going to be something we're always confronted with. And I think we'll get to it later, but it's like, it's something we go to God for constantly. And so it's something that other people are going to be coming to us for constantly, because we're just going to mess up. And so when you're confronted with that over and over and over again, sometimes it gets a little difficult to do it. But yeah, it's a never ending thing. Like you don't just forgive someone and then you're like, oh, I don't have to ever do that again. Like odds are tomorrow you will have to ask for forgiveness and forgive someone. Like it's just how an imperfect world works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one of the answers I actually had for a different question, but it's, once that question comes back up, I'll make reference it to again. If you look up just like verses about forgiveness, there are so many countless verses that are just like, forgive and you'll be forgive and the Lord will forgive. Like forgive as the Lord forgives you, and if you're forgiving, the Lord will do the same for your sins. And I'll name all the entire list that I have of just like just pinpointing all this time. But it's like, oh, there's a reason the strongest 2 commandments, or like the most important 2 commandments, are about loving, and that's kind of symbolic within forgiveness as well. Is like, okay, yeah, even though you've been hurt, it's like giving back to the people that have hurt you, and like not letting that sit and resonate with you is like, oh no, if somebody hurt me, like continue to like reach out your hand and be like, hey, you know what? I know this happened, but I still love you. And that sort of that as well. So saving my answer for that question when we come up to it. But anything else before we move on to question 4?
That was really loud. We can edit that out.
Is this the time for the ASMR brand deal?
Well, that was actually kind of
I think it is.
I'm low-key a veteran when it comes to this.
Go ahead and put that next to the mic.
Not me stressing out.
What am I watching?
Not me stressing out to see if some of that like carbonation is gonna go onto that microphone.
That mic will never be the same.
Hey, I am when it comes to pouring this without it overflowing, I'm low key him. Just gonna.
That's dangerously. I don't know if you guys can see this, but that was really close.
That was really close. I think they should be able to see that on the that camera over there.
Oh, we're editing all that out.
That's got to make it to a shorter.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I need more ice, but pause. I definitely need more ice.
Okay.
All right.
So
Edit all that out. Clean start.
are we really clean starting it, or I don't know.
Not from the beginning.
No,
Not from the beginning, but just from where you were.
No, we're not restarting everything we said. I think that was very good information. But
No, not from the beginning. Just like
from
you were
question
about-
4.
You were about to ask a new question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So question 4 is, what has been one of the hardest things to forgive in your lifetime? Do we start to pick this guy's brain about what he mentioned earlier, or
Let's pick my brain. So earlier before we started, I said there's nothing that I have that was like that hard to forgive the person for, right? And they were like, you don't have like why I said like you don't have resentment for anyone. I was like, no, like I have no enemies. You know, if y'all know what that's from, that's yeah. But yeah, like I just don't hold any resentment to anybody, and I've been trying to think, but I don't think there's like anything that was like that hard to forgive.
And I was saying, if you've never been done so dirty that you've never had like any sort of like, damn, dude, like this like you really did me like this, or like you really like question what somebody has done to you, you have just walked on just like the cleanest street. Well, in my life, I guess as a comparison, but comparison is a thief of joy, is like, dude, I have like walked in the dirtiest street where it's raining and cars and buses are just like splashing me with water. And I'm just constantly getting hit and hit and hit and hit and hit. So I'm like, dude, there's no way.
See,
you're like what, 22?
22, yeah.
And there's nothing in your life?
I mean, like if someone does me dirty, I'm like he even knows. I'm like, ain't no way. Like the words will come out my ain't no way, right? And then we'll talk about it, right? And if that person were to come up to me and be like, hey, I'm sorry, do you forgive me? I'm like, yes. Now, is it gonna be like immediate? Like, I don't think it's immediate. I think it's like Brett was saying, it's like you forgive over and over, like you were saying too, you forgive over and over again. But like it's happened probably. Nothing that I can think of like now that was like that hard, but it's just like kind of a I don't know how to even describe it. I'd have to see that person. They'd have to do the same thing over again for me to be like, okay, well, they've done this before. Like type of situation to come back up.
So like
It's weird.
Growing up, like your parents have just been they've just been perfect. Every past relationship or friendship.
NJ's parents are hype. I'm not gonna lie.
My parents are chill. Now, did I get beat all the time? Yes, but that was because of what I did. That was my fault.
Oh,
There's
That was
nothing
my
like playing.
fault.
There's nothing like playing FIFA and 2K at midnight, listening to his brother get screamed at by his mom in Nigerian. Hype.
Ebo. But yeah, I mean, my parents have never done anything to me that was like that hard to forgive or something that I didn't bring upon myself. So,
Or like friends at school or teachers or
Now his friends are pretty cool.
teachers, no. Friends, I mean, I guess we could say it's the hardest thing. It was third grade. This dude came to school, right? We're not supposed to have our DSIs at school. Okay, you guys might have heard this story before.
I have. I don't think I have.
You don't think? Okay, so we always brought it. We played Mario Kart, Pokemon on the bus ride to school, right? I have this thing in my backpack. Teacher doesn't know about it. Another friend in the class does know about it, right? This man, I don't know when he took it. He took it out of my bag. Get on the bus, it's not there, right? Or no, I noticed it wasn't there at school. I was like, hey, you have my DSI. He was like, no, I don't. I was like, yes, you do. You're the only one that has it. Right? Teacher comes up like, hey, guys, we have to go, right? I'm not going to tell teacher because I'm not trying to get in trouble. I know what happens if they find out, my parents find out I brought a DSI to school and I'm not supposed to. It's gone and I'm going to get beat. So I'm like, okay, right? This dude, his grandma found it, realized it's not his, brought it to the school. So my worst fear has just come to life. So yeah, from that day on, I think I saw it like twice a year for like the next 2 years. And then, yeah, I got in big trouble, pretty big trouble. I got, yeah. I mean, that's maybe the hardest thing, but other than that, I don't know.
So you just like, oh, the guy that stole my DSI and caused me to never see it again.
All I'm gonna say is, that spanking was different. It was different. My parents are watching this. I still remember that spanking to this day.
But that's genuinely like, whoa. You say like, you're looking at the camera saying, I still remember this. It's like, dude, like props to you, man. Like your ability to forgive has to be out of this world, just because it's like, hey, you know what? Somebody looks at me the wrong way, or somebody flips me off in the car when I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm thinking about that for the next 48 hours, man. I'm just like,
I mean, like it. I don't even know. Like it happens, but then I'm just like, it happened. Like there's nothing I can do about it at this point. It is, yeah, exactly that. I mean, like everything else, I brought upon myself. Like I have so many stories of so many beatings I've got because I was like really stupid. I mean, but like I didn't have to forgive my parents because they were just disciplining me for my actions. So
If your parents are watching this, I'm not gonna lie, I would just be impressed your dad knows how YouTube works.
they watch the Nigerian movies on there all the time. So yeah.
I'm gonna have to meet your parents one day. Hopefully,
yeah, one day.
If you can get his dad to talk, please let me know because I've never heard that man speak a word. And I've
is he
known his
just
name for 10
like
years.
does he just like not know English well, or is it just like he's very reserved?
He's very reserved. I mean, like he'll talk. I mean, you can get him to talk pretty easily, but you just have to like ask the right questions.
It's easy to get your mom to talk. You just get Chewy around and he'll get in trouble for something and she'll yell at him. But I've never heard your dad say a word.
I mean, he talks.
Maybe one day I'll turn into our buddy Zion, who's always just who's able to get anybody to talk and just be like, all right, you know what? We'll start a conversation. I've been spending too much time around him. No, but Brett, Enzo was the only one to answer that question. Yeah. So Brett, do you have an answer for it?
I do.
So depressingly he mentions that.
Well, it is a depressing answer. I'm not gonna lie. It's very short. I don't remember the wording of the question, but the hardest thing to forgive has always just been myself. Like I truly think someone could do anything to me and I would be able to forgive them, and yet like the smallest mistake I make or the smallest shortcoming I have, I can't find the ability to forgive myself for it, and it just is like that's always been my crux. Is like, how do I forgive myself? Like you could do anything, and I'm like we talked about earlier, like someone could say like talk the uttermost trash about me, and as long as it's funny, I don't really care. Like it doesn't bother me. But like I talk worse about myself in my head than I think anyone could ever talk about me. And so trying to learn how to forgive myself for those things and recognize that if God has extended grace to me, like I can surely extend grace to myself, and just figuring out how to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was deep.
Yeah.
Depressing.
Yeah. You see, yeah, Enze doesn't have anything. Brett's forgiving himself. I'm answering this question. I'm like, man, is this what do I like? Was this instance harder than instance? Like I was just like, okay, which one do I can actually put on this paper that could be like? And then I was trying to figure out which one was the most. Not like, okay, the question is one of the most. I don't have to just like think about all these times where I've just been like hit and pummeled down on the ground and been like, okay, no. So, dude, I need to take some notes from you guys. Hey. I guess now it's time for me to go to one of the hardest things. Now I feel lesser than that I'm actually sharing one of these things. But there was one time in my life, I was 17 years old, that I had this counselor that I was like genuinely going to like better myself. I guess you can kind of like, he wasn't like a therapist, but you can consider him sort of one. And every single time I told him, like, I was with him for like 3 months. The second day, I was like mentioning like, oh, what just happened to me in my life, like for the reason I was there so the second day up until the third to last day, he never believed a word I said because what I told him contradicted what like my parents told him. And this was the time of my life where I was letting everything go, like extremely vulnerable. And like, it has to do with like my testimony. And it was okay. I was being truthfully, like completely honest. And they were like, no, if you're not going to be honest with us, we're not going to be able to help you. And I would just remember hearing that. I was like, dude, there's nothing I can say or do to like prove that I'm being honest to you, but like whatever there is, like, please. And it was like one of the most heartbreaking times because it's like the one time, like I was a very wretched individual. And the one time I actually wanted to change was the time nobody was willing to extend their hand out. And that like, you know, like that's shaped me. So like I have, you know, over the process been forgiving of that. But it's one of the times where it's like, oh no, it's caused me to be so inspirational to other people. So now I'm looking at it in a different lens, even though it has hurt me so much. Because it was the time like, oh, if you're not going to help yourself, at least help the other people like that are here in counseling with you. So that's why I became a leader, was because I could either make everybody like pay attention, or I could be like the worst person and make everybody just like off the charts, that sort of thing. So it was always like, okay, I can use myself to help these people, but I never got the help I needed until like years later. So now thinking about it, it's like, okay, I'm in that process of forgiving. Like I'm 2/3 or 3/4 up the staircase, but then there's times where I'm just like, man, like in my lowest of lows, I didn't have like anybody to just like reach out a hand, unless it was like my father during this time. But like then again, it was just like, okay, I couldn't talk about these things with my father without it like starting something. So I was like, the one time I actually have somebody that we're paying to help me, is it helping me? I was like, dude, I just felt like it was so useless at the time. But I just know, like looking back at it now, like, hey, God had a different plan, and the plan wasn't for me to focus on myself. I can do that. I'm always like sitting outside thinking about how I can improve myself, or how God can help improve me. But it was like, oh no, that's the time where you like truly took leadership, truly took responsibility, and like truly helped inspire other people to better themselves. Which is now exactly why we do this podcast, is so we can have those leadership qualities, to be vulnerable, to help share, spread the truth, the way, and the life, and also the Bible as well. So yeah, man, dude, I could go on and on about this question. I don't know if I'm happy about that after your guys' answer. No. So
there's nothing wrong. I mean, like everyone coming up kind of has everyone grows up differently. So like a situation that I might have been in, you were in a different one, and it's kind of what shapes us. I mean, it's kind of how you grew up is different each way. No two stories will ever be the same.
Yeah, like what I was mentioning earlier. So, but at least it's caused me to be such a strong light in the spirit. So that's all I can. That's all praise God moments for that. But I guess we're moving on to, that was question 4. I guess we're moving on to question 5. Is, why do you think it becomes harder to forgive some people over others?
So, okay, hold on. I need my notes for this one.
I can start if you want.
Okay, yeah.
I think it goes back kind of like, it's all my answers kind of tie together. I think we just forget the total extent of God's grace. And it's easy to look at like, oh wow, like Wyatt doesn't deserve me to forgive him. Like Enze doesn't deserve my forgiveness, while forgetting that we didn't deserve God's forgiveness. Like Romans 5, like 6-11 talks about, like, while we were still sinners, God forgave us. While we were enemies of God, he forgave us. It's easy for us to forget that. We think, in some sense, we think we deserve it. Or even the beginning of Romans at the end of chapter 1, where Paul lists, like, I don't even know, too many adjectives of, like, just how depraved man is. We forget that. We forget that was us. And so it's easy I think it becomes, unfortunately, easy for us to just think that we deserve it and that you don't, while forgetting that we don't deserve it and we received it. So while you don't deserve it, you should receive it too. And I don't really know, in some sense, like, how to combat that other than just in moments where it's hard to forgive. Like, I think you first have to meditate on God's forgiveness of you in order to properly, like, then turn around and forgive someone else.
Okay. Piggybacking off of that, I agree with everything you just said. I also think with that, like, it can sometimes vary on who the person is. I mean, like, if you're like your mom compared to, like, a stranger, like, depending on what it is, if they both did the same act, it'd probably be easier to forgive someone that you know than, like, a stranger. And just kind of like that, just the person, it depends on what they did. I mean, I feel like sometimes we'll feel like they did something, like, so bad that, like, they don't deserve my forgiveness, or you might not even be thinking about forgiveness. It might all just be anger. I read something the other day. It was like there's like stages, right? There were like denial, anger. I can't remember. We might link it in the bottom, but there's like so many stages of it, and just all of those kind of play together in that too.
I think, like, one of them is also, like, acceptance or something like that. I think I might have seen something like that, but make sure you send it to me so we can actually share it. All right, so as you can tell, there's probably a little bit of change of the light. We ran into a camera difficulty, the first one ever. We're still trying to learn through this process. The camera said it was charged, but I guess it died. It maybe overheated or just whatever. But that's besides the point. So that's why there's going to be a random cut, the first cut ever in this podcast. So there's a first for everything. But I guess what we left off on was my answer to question 5, which was, why do you think it becomes harder to forgive some people than over others? And my answer was, the sincereness makes it easier, but when others don't admit, it can lead to overthinking or destructive thoughts. Kind of going back to that point that I had to make about releasing. And, if you aren't properly able to release, and I know, for Christians, it might be easier than others because we have that backbone of Bible or religious text to be able to release in that, hey, don't worry, we're forgiven. Let God have his way, and we don't have to have our way. But yeah, overthinking and destructive thoughts are, something that I even still struggle with, but sometimes it's just, I need to get down on my knees and be like, hey, God, take this. But then, the times where people are, like, thoroughly sincere about what they share, it makes it so much easier to forgive, because I'm like, you know what? You're already taking that step. And then I don't really have to do anything after that. But I know it's kind of weird with this cut. So now we're going to, or I guess now we're ready for question 6. So if you guys are ready, I'm more than happy to share it.
Yeah, I'm ready.
So question 6 is, why is it so hard to ask for forgiveness? Kind of the reverse of what we've been doing. So, like, we having to forgive others, why is it hard for us to now ask for people to forgive us?
So if I'll go ahead and share first. Me personally, it's definitely gotten a lot better, but sometimes I feel like, depending on the person, it could be a pride thing. Like, maybe they wronged you first and you wronged them. You could be like, oh, why do I need to ask for forgiveness if they did to me? Or sometimes it's just like not something you might be thinking of, or it's just a hard thing in general. Just pride can really get in the way of that.
And then I guess pride is also a good word to use as well. But the word I actually wrote down was like, it can be extremely hard to humble yourself at times. To be like, you know what? As much as it's hard to like say, I'm sorry, like I did this thing wrong. That's only one part of the message. Is like for an apology, it's like saying sorry is only one part. Then you have to say like, will you also forgive me? Which is, you know, again, like you're saying sorry, so you're always like taking accountability, but then you're all like you're taking one knee, like getting on the ground with one knee to say I'm sorry. Then you have to get down with your other knee and be like, will you forgive me? It's just like, dude, it's one of those things where you have to like really break yourself down to be like, hey, I know what I did wrong. Like, but it's a matter of like now you're like, hey, can you admit that like you know that I did wrong, but like I'm still accepted and like appreciated even through that like shoot man. Cause you know, there's probably been times in our life where like, hey, we've had to ask for forgiveness and man, it's hard, but once you are forgiven, it feels so much greater afterwards. So then that's another thing is like you might not know how it's received. Sometimes you might ask for forgiveness and they say no. And that might sting. But you know, you can only control so much and you can only control yourself. So I don't know if you have an answer to question 6.
I wrote down in my notes, be genuine and open here. I don't know what that means. That's great note taking, great preparation. Obviously jogging the memory great here. Be genuine and open here. Can you repeat the question? Maybe that'll help.
Okay, so the question is, why is it so hard to ask for forgiveness?
Why is it so hard?
Do you not know what genuine and open mean? Do we have to describe those for you?
I do. I just
or
don't know why I wrote it. Like, I'm trying to figure out what I meant by, like, there had to be something in my head of, like, being genuine and open about. I think it has to do, just me personally. I think we're good now. We're great note-taking preparation. See, it worked. I think it personally has to do, one, we've talked about it a little bit just tonight. One, I just struggle to feel like I deserve forgiveness at times. Like I can feel like I don't need to ask for forgiveness because like I just don't deserve for them to say yes. Like I'd rather them say no because it's what I deserve. And so that's kind of usually my crux of like not asking for forgiveness is because like part of me kind of just doesn't want them to say yes because I just don't deserve it. And so trying to like work through that of like, yeah, I think that's my biggest struggle with that. Is just, I feel like I don't deserve it. Which is true. Like there is truth in that. We don't deserve forgiveness, like from God, in a sense, from other people. There's a healthy understanding of our lack of deservedness of forgiveness and grace. Okay. Like
we're gonna cut that out.
no, we're not. Like there is I don't think you can fully understand God's grace and forgiveness if you don't first understand like how much you don't deserve it. But there is an unhealthy like way to take that further. And I feel like that's what I do sometimes. But again, I do think there's a healthy way of like a healthy acceptance of, wow, I don't deserve this, which then makes the forgiveness that much sweeter.
When it is truly given, because
Yeah.
you know we don't deserve God's forgiveness, but He does it, which makes it just like dude. I said that and I just lit up with a smile. Like it's dude, like you don't deserve it, but it's given, and it's like just so gracious and generous to be like, you know what, I've made so many mistakes in my life, and I am forgiven. As long as I can continue to forgive the other people in that sort of way. So it's one of those things like, you know, like kind of we talked about during the intermission is like unpacking everything is like, there's reasons. So like there are kind of good reasons why, you know, I have maybe struggled with forgiveness, but you know, I still need to unpack those things and unwrap them and like really like put God's hand and God's love onto those situations as well. But then question 7 is, why do you think it's so easy for us to know that God forgives us, but harder to understand when someone does?
I guess I'm going first again.
Unless you don't want to go first, I got a good answer. It
Yeah,
kind of
you go first.
okay. So this is what I touched on already was like forgive as the Lord forgave you, and if you forgiving the Lord, if you forgiving the Lord will do the same. And then now I get to go through all the verse list, and this is just a few. There are so many more, probably dozens and dozens that just say like forgive and the Lord will forgive you, or and that sort of thing. But like Ephesians 4, 31 through 32, which I already shared, Matthew 6, 14 through 15, Colossians 3, 12 through 14, Luke 6, 37 through 38, Mark 11, 25 are all just literally those words. And then there's probably all those other verses that are just like, hey, any sort of forgiveness. And you could probably just look online and you'll say like, hey, if you think about anything about discipline, there's a lot less. If you do anything for just forgiveness, probably close to 100 just on forgiveness alone, and like, you know, how that's kind of represented with love as well. And then that just goes exactly to what I've shared multiple times with multiple people is my favorite set of verses in the Bible, which is Matthew 7 verses 1 through 4, which is, do not judge or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. In the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eyes and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brothers, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? And I like to represent that. Like you can even show with like, hey, judgment is like, oh, I like this person might do something, and it's like, oh no, if I'm looking in that sort of lens, then I need to look back, because then there's it's like a mirror with the magnifying glass, like, oh, they only have a dust. You got this whole plank. So if it's like, okay, I can't forgive, then how am I supposed to be forgiven? And that's kind of how I've been unraveling that, is like, oh, if I do this and I can't forgive, if I do this thing, why am I asking for forgiveness if I can't forgive for this little minor thing that's happened to me? And I know I kind of can correlate that as just like, hey, if you substitute the word judge for forgiveness, not exactly, but if you like translate it as like, oh, if you know, if you are always looking outward for like forgiveness, like in God gives you forgiveness, why can't you do the same for others and kind of like help stream that along? I just thought I'd share that, even though it has to do with judgment. We'll probably get into that in a different episode down the line, and then I'll really go in depth with that. But
Yeah.
it's just another thing, and it's a one note that I actually took during this as well before I let you guys share. So sorry for taking the moment, but I literally wrote this down. And when this was when you were speaking, I was like, okay, forgiving is as hard as you make it. Because you can forgive, you can make it easy on yourself, but then there's times where it's like, I'm like, okay, I got in my own head. I'm like, okay, I can step away a little bit further and like get out of the heat of the situation and then forgive more. And I literally just wrote, wow moment. What would Jesus do?
Yeah.
So
I think we can oftentimes find comfort in like our anger at people. Like it's a lot easier to just sit in our anger of people than to actually confront that and like work through that and process through that and forgive for that. And so I think that's what leads to that, is like, it's as easy as we make it, but sometimes it's comfortable to make it hard. Like that's the hard truth of it, is we like to be comfortable in making it hard sometimes.
right.
And I think going back to what you were saying just about forgiving, like forgiving others as like Christ forgave you. There are multiple verses especially at the end of 1 John. I gotta find it. I feel like I should have it memorized, but so everyone says John 3:16 is like the Bible verse of the Bible. Me and my dad always say that 1 John 3:16 should be it, but no one actually wants to like confront the truth of 1 John 3:16, which NIV says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, so we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." And so it takes the truth of John 3:16 and the grace and the love of John 3:16 and says, okay, now you go do that too. And that's something I think we struggle with at times, of like, it can be easy to accept God's grace and love in our life, but then to actually turn around and apply that to other people is something that I think is like, I don't want to do that. And I think that kind of ties into just all the like, they don't deserve it. They like, it's hard. Like we've kind of just covered that all night. Like taking the truth of what God has given us and turning that around is just so difficult. One, because we're not God, but it's just so hard. And it's something we're called to do. Like later in 1 John, in verse 23, it says, and this is his command, to believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. Like, it's one command, like belief in him and to love as he commanded us in verse 16, to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters as he laid down his life for us, is one. It's not like a 1A and a 1B. Like, in our belief, we are to love as he loved. And that's something like, and you've talked about like forgiveness, like there has to be a foundation of love, like it's born out of love. And so unless we are loving as Christ loved, which is so hard, like it's hard to forgive others. It's hard to, like, it's hard to do that.
You have what you would want to share, or do you want to bounce off of that?
Honestly, you guys hit the mark. What I basically had was kind of, it can be sometimes hard to wrap our heads around like that grace that we like receive from God. That sometimes like we can say like we know that our sins are forgiven, but like when someone else forgives us, it's like that person that person isn't God. Like how can, like, it's like doubt kind of like, can they really forgive us, or just such as that. I feel like that, like me personally, maybe some other people, that like that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Or even if you're, which I've struggled with at times, like if you're struggling to believe like that God forgave you, then for someone else to turn around, it's like, if God can't forgive me, like that person definitely can. And it's just kind of like a hard, like if you aren't grounded in the truth of God's grace, it's almost impossible to accept that anyone else can give it to you.
And then one of the things is like, this might even just be a weird concept to even like say or think, but it's like, okay, imagine you want to think as everybody, like as Jesus Christ himself. Like what would I do if Jesus Christ was in front of me is how you should act to like everybody. So then kind of thinking about like, oh, even though this is just so unfathomable and I don't even know how I'm even like putting this out there, is like, what if somebody was walking, like for instance, what if Jesus Christ did something wrong to you? You would endlessly forgive them and forgive him. So what if you're acting like everybody is Jesus himself? Then if next thing you know, like, oh, if you would endlessly forgive this person, you should be endlessly forgiving anybody that you come in contact to, even if it is extremely hard, as I know. And it's like, hey, I need to learn and exactly practice what I preach. But it's like, hey, if everybody was Jesus Christ, you would forgive everybody endlessly, no matter what sort of scenario you were in. Then you actually have to live that out, which is I need to practice that probably most in this room. But it's like, hey, you're like, I went through what I went through what I did to have these moments where I need to just continuously like be, no, I forgive you. I like let people know I forgive them.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that eliminates, Enze talked about it a little bit, of like, it can be easier to forgive in some sense, like someone you have a relationship with versus someone you don't, like just a stranger versus a parent. But I think like in some sense that mentality kind of eliminates that barrier of like, it doesn't matter how close my relationship is or how distant my relationship is, like their need for forgiveness and their like, it doesn't change the amount of grace I need to extend to them. Like it's grace. Like there isn't like, oh, this person gets this amount. Like it's just an outpouring of love and grace. And I think that mentality really like eliminates that barrier of like, I can forgive this person, but I don't really have to forgive this person because I won't ever see him again.
right. There's no boundary behind it or to it.
Yeah. Because it's very easy, I think, for us to create mental barriers. Like any chance we have of like, I don't really want to do that. Like what's an excuse I can come up with? Like, I won't see that person again, or like that person like was in a different car. Like I'll never interact with that person again. Like any chance I think we have to create excuses to not do something hard, we will. And so something like that, like just eliminates that ability to do so.
Right. Well, that's everything I have in this book, even though I've written like 4 or 5 pages. So unless you guys have anything else to share before the awkward silence hits.
I don't think so.
Actually, as you were saying that,
Okay.
I just thought it might be actually easier to forgive the stranger more than your mom or dad. Like, for example, stranger trips you, you bruise your knee, right? You're not going to see him again. But your dad trips you, you bruise your knee. Like, you might have to see him again. It might be harder, but like, yeah.
No, and I was actually thinking that like, when you mentioned that, I was like, oh, maybe sometimes it's harder to forgive your parents because you're going to like, oh, imagine they just hit you and then you're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to, or hit you physically or metaphorically, and then you're just like, oh, next thing you know, you're gonna wake up in the morning and like everything has to be changed. Like no, you're gonna think about that, but that stranger, it's like, oh, you know what, I would mess them up if I saw them again, and you like never would, and then over time it's just like, oh, dude. It doesn't phase you, like you don't care about it ever again. So
Yeah.
Awkward silence.
okay, so the awkward silence is hitting. So when I stop talking and everybody looks at me, that's when I know I got to end it. So forgiveness. It was a very, very hard topic to kind of fully grasp. So I think we did a very well job today of actually being able to formulate a lot of the ideas. I know I had a bunch of verses, and I hope I can continue to do that. We always better prepare for that self. So I want to give us a round of applause because I think we really did a good job today putting together what we wanted to say and putting together what probably or what we didn't want to say but also should have been heard. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was something I was, nervous to talk about, but I'm very glad that it's finally over and I get to reflect on these sort of things. So next week we'll be talking about the importance of serving. So stay tuned for that. Brett's going to be a main character in that, like always, because he's got that trip to talk about, but we don't want to spoil so much. Again, I always shake your hand and then I just look at Brett and I say,
Don't tell him I'm the main character beforehand or no one will watch. You got to wait till the episode starts.
So he's not the main character actually, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and then stay tuned for next Thursday at 3 p.m. All right. See ya.